Sorry about the frog in the voice. I am quite ill right now. I've got a pretty bad cold, so I'm going to do this video while I'm sick. So congratulations, you guys get to deal with it. All joking aside, uh, today I'm going to cover Anima deep dive again, and I'm going to go through the most basic parts of the game. And hopefully by the end of it, you guys will have an idea for how Anima itself plays on a basic level before we start getting into the more detailed mechanics around skills or secondary abilities. Um, and resistances and combat and all that kind of stuff. Because all these basics actually are going to make a difference when we go through character creation to help understand how different things work in creation. Okay, so uh, the section starts out with understanding that the game is a game of luck, yada yada yada. So we're not going to get into that part. But how do you make dice rolls in this game? There's two types of dice that are going to be used in this game: D10, D100. Um, and there are two types of rolls. There's characteristic checks and ability checks. Ability checks are going to be your most frequent checks. Once you roll on a ability check, you roll a D100, and you try to beat a difficulty number. I mean, it's a pretty common sense system. By adding that ability, of course, yada yada yada. The second is characteristic checks, which is made with a D10, and you're trying to roll under the D10. However, this system does have what's called an open roll system, which is if you roll a 90 or greater, you get to roll again, adding that new roll to the previous. Um, However, it does not stay at 90. Every additional roll, it goes up by 1 point. So if you roll a 90 to get a second roll, you would have to roll a 91 on the third roll. Or if you roll a 90 on the first roll, you need a 91 on the second roll to get another open roll. And it kind of builds up. And so it's a pretty simplistic way to think of it. It's basically a way to prevent you from just consistently exploding. A 100, no matter what, is always an open roll. No matter what happens, if you roll triple zeros, you're getting an open roll. And you can get open rolls on any D100 check except for resistance checks, fumble levels, and critical levels, which again, those go into deeper aspects of the system. Fumbles, though, do have a very specific role in this game, and each fumble level is going to be different based on whether or not using secondary characteristics, resistances, and all of that. But the basics of fumbles are covered in this section. In the same way, you can have great success by means of an open roll. All of the possibility exists that automatic failure occurs due to a fumble. When somebody rolls a D100 and result is a 1, 2, or a 3, he has fumble. So it's an immediate failure. He's not been successful at all. Then he rolls a D100 and modifies it based on the die roll that created the fumble. He's going to get a modifier to that roll. If it's a 1, it adds 15. If it's a 3, it minuses 15. A 2 adds and subtracts nothing. Again, so the example they give in here is the mower rolls a 1 on a high check, which is a fumble. His player rolls a D100 to calculate the fumble level and gets 90. Since the original roll was a 1, the player adds 15 points to the result, so the mower has a final fumble of 105. Fumbles are specifically covered in those specific sections, and we'll get more into how fumbles work for each individual part when we get to those parts. But just know that's how you calculate fumbles, is it is a D100 roll. So it's possible to fumble and not fumble at all, and it's also possible to fumble and completely botch it. And again, fumbles are not open rolls, so it is going to be a minimum of 1, a maximum of 115. And then there's mastery with your abilities. A character that has 200 in a base in a skill and a secondary characteristic or an ability is considered to be a master. He is an expert without equal in the field, a person who can do things the rest of the world would not believe possible. It's more difficult for them to make mistakes than a normal person. A 3 is no longer a fumble for a master on that ability. And a 2 minus 15 and a 1 does not have a modifier. So basically, the higher your skill ranks get, the better you get at them, of course, to a point where you can get so high that literally it makes it harder for you to botch, which is really nice. That's actually a really nice ability thing. And then basic ability checks are made rolling D100, adding the results to the character's ability. There's two different types of check. You have difficulty checks and opposed checks. Difficulty checks are determined by a number determined by the GM. Uh, and generally, I believe the average difficulty check is like 120. Because this game uses bigger numbers, is 120. Um, and then you have your opposed checks. Two abilities are directly compared to each other. These checks are diverse and specialized, so each will explain detail in different sections and how it's worded. But opposed checks generally, whoever has the bigger margins going to win if both succeed. Same concept as a lot of other RPGs. But that's the basics of it. Those are the types of ability checks you're going to make. Then you have what are called resistance checks. Resistance checks are basically saving throws. Um, there are 5 different checks, which depend on what's affecting it. You roll a d100, add your resistance. If it beats the required difficulty, it has no effect. Um, no matter what the difficulty resistance check is, if it's 100, it's always successful. A resistance check cannot have an open roll, and if it has resistance 50 points higher than the required difficulty, it's automatically successful. You can't. So if a difficulty, say you have a difficulty 80 and you have a resistance of 130, you don't need to make a roll. Pretty simple. Characteristic checks are pretty simple as well. You roll a d10, you try to roll under the characteristic. Characteristics in this game go 1 to 20, with 10 being the human maximum. And you will wind up in opposed checks. Whoever gets the greater uh, yeah, gap between their roll will, if they both succeed, will be the winner. So if somebody has a 10 and only rolls a 7, and you have a 7 and you roll a 1, you still win because you have a 6-point difference. There you go. Common sense. Again, lots of RPGs do that. That's opposed checks. Now there is a little bit of nuance in this, in that if you have more than double or is greater than 4 between the two stats, uh, each additional point counts as 2 when making a check. So in this case, Silly, this is an example from the book. Silly makes an opposed strength check against Serenade. Silly has a strength of 5, where Serenade is a supernatural being who has an 11 strength. Since the difference between the two characteristics is since the difference between the two characteristics is greater than 4 by 2 points, Serenade doubles those 2 additional points when making the check. Therefore, Silly would make a roll against strength 5, whereas Serenade would have the purpose of this check of strength of 13. So basically, what it matters here is uh, you would go from 10 and 11 would count as 2 points each versus 1 point. It's a little bit of an awkward thing. It reads very awkward, but it makes sense in my head. I don't know if I'm making sense of it, if that uh, description there makes sense of it, but it basically, the higher your stats are over somebody else, the less luck has to play into it, is what they're trying to do. Because somebody who's clearly stronger than somebody else, like very much stronger than somebody else, should not run the risk or have as much of a risk of getting crippled in a strength contest or a agility contest. So it's really designed to prevent luck from overcoming common sense. And then the last thing uh, you do is there's a call to roll of 10 and 1. When a character makes a characteristic check with only a d10, he falls under the roll of 10 and 1. If you roll a 10, subtract 3 points to the difference with the characteristic, equivalent to have rolled a 13. If you roll 1, add 3 points to difference in the with characteristics, you roll -2. A player rolls a dexterity check in which the character has a 9. He rolls a 1, which is a difference of 8 points in his favor. Thanks to the roll of 1, he adds 3 points for a total of 11 points. If he rolls 10, instead of failing by 1, he would fail by 4. So, for all extents and purposes, uh, they say this very awkwardly. If you ever roll a 1, add 3 to the result. If you roll a 10, you subtract 3 or add 3 to the failure as well. Uh, so if you would normally fail by, if you have, like you said, if you have a 9 in a stat, you roll over it, roll a 1, you add 3 points, it gives you 11 points. Yeah, I mean, again, worded very weird. I think that's probably a translation thing, how it's worded, but it does make sense. in that you botch your characteristic roll. And guys, that's the most basic parts of Anima. The next video will be character creation, so we'll go through characters. We'll talk about the actual creation process, and how it builds out and how characters build. I will probably want to have to do a video on creating a character itself and actually going through character creation with the character once we go through the the three major chapters on character creation, which are going to be characters, classes, and secondary abilities. I'm not going to deal with the additional races right now. I will go in that chapter, but I'm not going to deal with it too heavily because Anima at its base assumes you're human. You can play additional races, but the additional races are a little bit wonky. They get some pretty powerful abilities as well, and they can make playing a character a little different. For the purposes of me going this book, I'm going to assume you're creating a human character, and therefore we're going to play off of human limits and all that kind of stuff. But otherwise, guys, as always, we do welcome your thoughts, comments, questions, concerns if you have any. Otherwise, we do hope that you guys have fun and do hope to see you guys around.